Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Jensen here. So today we're going to talk about doing scientific research. So in my course, we do two parts. So the research methodology is usually broken up into two parts. In this case, our first part of the assignment is looking at a bibliography, is generating the resources that you need in order to write a research paper. And so here in the overview, you can see that there's quite a few steps generally considered to be a part of any kind of academic research writing, if you're doing it for a course, or I mean, this can be more for any other course, not just for your chemistry course. But here we want to focus on just the top three. Okay, picking your topic and conducting some preliminary research. So in our assignment, you need to find a certain number of sources. And when we're looking for sources, usually we want to try and find diversity in our sources. So this means trying to find things like journal articles, finding magazines, finding newspaper articles, finding books, etc., and beyond just Google and websites. So our first assignment is to find a variety of sources for a particular topic. Now, this can help you to, number one, either find a topic or narrow down your topic. But first, we have to understand what is our assignment. So for this assignment, as I said, we want to focus on finding 18 different kinds of resources, 6 of them being scientific journals, 4 books, reference newspapers and magazines, and various popular science publications. In the first part, we were just finding the bibliographic references or sources. So you don't need to do like a full annotated bibliography. Again, some courses do that where you have, here's the citation, and then here's a little blurb about what that citation is. We're not doing that. Here, you're just gathering some sources. And then step 2 of this will be to write a research paper on this chosen topic. Okay, so these are kind of connected, but these are meant to be a first step of just gathering information so that I know that you've gone through some kind of process of collecting information, or at least looking for information in the right area. So then we need to move on to picking a topic. Now, it doesn't matter which class you have. Choosing a research paper topic is usually the most difficult part, okay? In many science classes, there are constraints. Like if you are in a chemistry class, oftentimes the professor will want you to pick a chemistry topic, okay? For my class, I am not as strict on the particulars of your topic, so it doesn't have to be specifically a chemistry topic. I am well-versed in most areas of science, so I can read and digest whatever kind of science topic you want to do. So this really opens the floor for you to pick something that you like, okay? I want you to pick a subject that you're interested in, because I feel that if you pick a subject you are interested in, I am more likely to get a better research paper, rather than I had to pick a chemistry topic and I picked some random topic that I know nothing about and it was super boring and here's what you got. Okay, I don't really want that. Now, there are any number of things that we can pick from. Okay, I have usually, and I'll tell you about where you can go to look for good sources or look for ideas. So these are topics that people have generally kind of picked at. And again, some of these are things like that I went to like Science News and browsed around to see what some current science topics, or went to Nature, and again, we'll talk more about these in a second, and looked at current research or current news or opinion areas about certain topics, right? So any one of these many of these may be too large for obviously our uses. We're only doing a 1,400 word paper, which is not too large for a freshman class. You can probably expect to write more in other classes probably. So picking a specific area is just going to get you started on your search. So as you're thinking about things that you're interested in, okay, think of the science that's involved in the areas that you're interested in, right? So if we think about things like diseases, okay, obviously things like COVID-19 are a big news item. There are lots of things to talk about as far as the current pandemic, uh, as far as research papers, certain treatments, drug protocols, whether we're talking about public health issues. These are science issues. We're talking about the science of public health and public policy. I mean, these are fundamentally based in science areas. So there are ways to write certain research papers on these things. Any other disease, again, you can pick the kinds of disease, and we'll talk about the kind of research paper that you want to write probably next time. I get people that write about different kinds of drugs, good, bad, or indifferent. People pick various kinds of drugs to do research papers on. Obviously, I think I've probably been doing this for 5 or 6 years, and probably inevitably, every semester I get someone who does methamphetamine. It happens every semester. Someone gives me a meth paper. So I can probably go back and find one of those every single time. So, but there's all kinds of drugs that you could pick. How is it developed? How is it synthesized? What kinds of effect does it have on the body? Just looking around at other things, some cool science stuff that I usually will talk about in lecture at some point, things like microneedles, 3D printing. In my 112 class, we talk about kinetics, so radioactive dating and all kinds of things are there's all kinds of geology and things that we can write research papers on. Satellite imagery and spectroscopy are topics that we touch on in most of the freshman chemistry classes. Things like climate change, big issues for our generation, for the next generation to come. But climate change is one of these things we'll talk about here. It's probably too big of a particular topic that you want to pick on. So you may have to start with that and then narrow down. Things like desalinization, getting fresh drinking water. These are chemical processes that, how do we get ions and things out of the water? These are difficult problems that we struggle with. There's all kinds of cool technology, wearable sensors that all have all kinds of chemistry and technology underpinnings that are not just the touch screen. People have written about things like genetically modified foods. Homeopathy is a big one that we often do particular research on, or I talk about in class as systemic issues stemming from the use of homeopathy and poor research processes, and how we don't follow the scientific method, and then we use shoddy research in order to demonstrate that these things work or really don't work. And so there's all kinds of things that you can pick. And like I said, my goal for my class would be to find something that you're interested in and start there. And again, we can talk about different kinds of research as you get through and in class. So once you have a general idea of what you want to do, preliminary research, we need to, again, we have to focus a little bit, because some of these topics are too big. Again, it's 3-4 pages is not a lot of space. Okay, I mean, for you guys, and oftentimes in freshman classes, writing 3 or 4 pages might seem kind of daunting. I don't know. It's been so long since I've been a freshman. I don't know I don't remember kind of the difficulty level of classes that I worried about, like how much I had to write. I mean, I can fall down a flight of stairs and like 20 or 30 pages of text can fall out of me. So I don't, like 4 or 5 pages is like, that's like 3 or 4 minutes worth of work. So for you guys though, these kinds of topics can be, putting something like climate change, where there's just literal books, there are dozens and dozens and hundreds of books written on some of these topics. If you want to talk about things like, nanotechnology, it's like, okay, this is a huge, people write dissertation research on these kinds of things and write 300-page books on this kind of stuff. You can't, doing 4 pages is like skimming Wikipedia. You're not giving me anything as far as depth. There's no real discussion of anything of substance that you're going to cram in 3 to 4 pages if you pick a topic like climate change. Okay, that's an info pamphlet, right? So an information pamphlet on climate change could fill 3 or 4 pages, right? So we have to think about what beyond the topic, you have to have some general idea of like, where do you want to go with this information? What is the particular tack that you want to take? And again, we'll talk about doing particular writing in the next, in another video, but if there's a specific aspect that you want to look at, right? Is there some new area that's being explored that you want to talk about? You want to look at the newest thing in polymer research. What kinds of things can we do now that's going to be, exciting stuff that we're not going to see for a couple of years? What kind of where is artificial intelligence at that we're coming to down the road? Looking at neuronal implants and things like that, stuff that is super high tech, and where you're not going to find a lot of books being written about neuronal implants and things. So you have to think about that. Where do you want to go? What do you want to know? And so that's going to drive some of the preliminary research about your topic that you're trying to go to. Okay. Now, when starting research, hard part is generally, where do I start? Now, whether you're starting from where do I start looking for information, or I'm still I'm browsing for topics information. So things like Science News, just Google Science News. It's a great website. They have all kinds of articles that are very well written. Same thing for Nature. If you look for Nature Journal, it's a great website. They have all kinds of resources. Again, not all of their articles are open source, but nonetheless, there are research. They talk about current research. They talk about current science news. There's opinions. There's all kinds of things in there that you can find as far as generating good ideas for science topics, especially if you're coming into a science class to where you don't even know where to start with a science topic. These are great places to go to start, to see what are people talking about right now in science. Okay, you're obviously not going to pick these things up from Facebook and things like that, where people are still talking about whether or not we evolved, or whether or not the Earth is flat. So if you want current research, these are the better places to go. Wikipedia gets kind of a bad rap, but when we're doing preliminary research and trying to decide on a topic, or trying to investigate of some general ideas about, like, if you read something about some particular topic in Science News, and then you come over to Wikipedia and read an article about it, again, Wikipedia is very good for giving you relatively concise amounts of information and a general good overview of a particular topic. Now, you're obviously not going to use Wikipedia for your writing, but nonetheless, it gives you an idea. It gives you a place to start where you can get some general background and make a decision as to whether or not that's an area you want to go into do research on, right? So once you have moved beyond I have a general topic, also those websites like Science News and Nature are great for doing preliminary research on a topic that you've chosen. Like, you can search on their website and see what kind of articles have been written about your topic too. Because again, generally the articles are well written. They're written for a diverse audience, so they are generally relatively layman friendly for the most part, and you can get good information from them on a topic that you've chosen. Okay. Once you move past that, most universities, you got to go to the library. Okay. Now, by going to the library, obviously, I don't mean we're actually physically going to the library. Most people usually don't do that anymore, as far as I'm aware. Most everybody's going to do their research online. And so your university is going to have some kind of library page. And for us, again, it's just university name / library, right? And for our small university, we have Ask a Librarian. You have 24/7 research help. So even if you're writing your paper at midnight, there is someone online there to help you. Okay. And I'm pretty sure that most good universities have this kind of resource available to students. Okay. Especially now where everybody's working online. There's somebody available at any hour of the day that you're doing research. So if you need help, there are librarians, there are research librarians who can help you find and access information 24 hours a day. Okay. Now for us, it is very easy. They usually put things into some easy categories. They have research guides and obviously like books and ebooks, but articles is where you want to start. And for me, most of the time when I'm starting any kind of research, Academic Search Complete, perfect place, right? It has pretty much everything that you might need. Okay, especially if we're talking about science. Now there are all kinds of other databases, things like opposing arguments and things like that can give you a variety of perspectives about other issues. But for most of our stuff, there aren't opposing viewpoints for the most part on many of the scientific areas. And even if there were, you're going to find that in the journal articles themselves, right? So Academic Search Complete is generally going to be your primary go-to. Now, generally, because this one has so many areas, there's about 24 databases connected to that. So as you're doing research, some things that you need to do are to think about your focus. Okay, because again, as we're doing this preliminary research, when you go in there and you type in your search criteria, okay, something like climate change, for example, okay, I did a quick search on climate change in my database, and I got something like 1 million sources. Okay, you're not going to be able to weed through that in a sense of the in a realistic time frame. So we have to work on our keyword searches. What kind of words do you want to search for? Okay, and so this is where we get research. So we are researching for our information. So this may mean that as you do an initial search, you gather some sources. As you go to do your writing, you may find that those 18 sources you collected don't help you at all. Probably because you picked the first 18 sources that you had, you didn't read them before you pulled them as sources to slap together for the bibliography. Happens, but nonetheless, if you don't find that they're of any help, you need to go back and research and find sources that are actually going to help you for writing a paper. Okay, so as I was saying, things like climate change can be too large of a topic. So if you type in a search, and the same thing happens in Google, when we type in a search and you type in climate change, you get 40 million websites for climate change because it just searches for everything. You're not being very specific. And so if we want to narrow this, sometimes we have to pick kind of a sub area. Maybe you want to talk about the effect on sentinel species or agricultural effects, human health, hurricane patterns, carbon and land management. Any of these kind of areas are kind of little sub areas of a much larger topic that make it a little easier to digest as far as a research paper. Because trying to cram anything in 4 to 5 pages, you're not going to get any amount of depth. You're basically giving me a Wikipedia article of climate change, because again, we're trying to develop some depth in doing actual research, not giving me the pamphlet version. Okay, so when you do a first search in a real academic database, one of the things that you may find is that they will give you other search criteria. Okay, so these are search terms that are often associated. They're like meta tags that are thrown into the article. If you use things like tags um, for YouTube articles or YouTube videos and things, like how do you want to direct your audience? Like these are tags that are going to get associated with the article, so that way the article can be found if you use these particular search things. Now, the other thing that shows up in here too are author supplied keywords. So the author who wrote the article is giving particular keywords that they think were important for their article. So in an article on climate change, the authors put base points. Okay, well, what is a base point? It's like, why would they pick that as important? Like that, maybe that's something important that now I have to go look up, and maybe that's a criteria that I want to add as far as a search term. That if we're looking at things like, clearly this is looking at like things like sea level rising, right? So if we're looking at water level issues, maybe base point is an important criteria when measuring things like water, seawater levels as in regard to climate change. So these can be helpful, especially if you're venturing into a new science topic and you're unsure of other terms other than generic terms. Like if you do a search on flu vaccine, right? So in most science things, it wouldn't be called flu, right? It would be influenza, right? And so maybe, coming up with those kinds of terms will help you to guide towards the topic that you're interested in doing, right? So these can often be good points of contact to look at and see what should you be searching for. Okay, if I'm looking at global warming, what other topics should I be searching for? Okay, now we'll look at the database here in just a second so you can see, but when you click on this, we have to, especially if your first assignment is to just develop or come up with the bibliography references, okay? Now, if we're in the database gives all this. Academic Search Complete gives things like books, newspaper articles, journal articles, videos. They got, pretty much all the categories that you want to hit. What was the scientific publications or the popular science magazines and things. It has pretty much everything. Like you can find, it's kind of a one-stop shop where you could potentially find everything that you want in here. Now, when you're doing that though, okay, no one should really be writing citations. Now, particularly for my class, I have chosen APA. There are two common ones that most people usually use for science. It's either APA or MLA. In this case, I have chosen APA. It's just, I got used to using it from before, and so that's the one that I prefer. Every professor that you have is probably going to have their own preference as to which type of citation method they like. Okay, so I mean, I've had people that use the Chicago one. It's horrible, but that's the one from their discipline that they want to go with, and then you got to do it in that format. And we have to go with what the professor wants to have for the citation format. But when you're in here, on the right-hand side of the screen, it will have things like saving the article, printing it, or the cite button, okay? If you click on that, it will give you the APA citation, especially, and it gives you all the citations, but nonetheless, it gives you all of the different formats for citation. So if you were doing a research paper or we're doing a bibliography, right? So we're just gathering sources, that's a citation, okay? That's what you need for your bibliography if you're gonna cite this article. They do the work for you. You don't have to, you shouldn't be writing APA or MLA citations for most citations that you want, okay? Now, obviously, if it's a website and things like that, most websites don't have their citation listed, so those are a little more where you got to generate them, but there's websites that can help you to generate citations. But nonetheless, here, if you're working within the Academic Search Complete database, as well as ProQuest. Most of the academic databases have this feature where you can click the citation and then you can have it display what citation format do you like. Okay, so you need 18 of these in the different areas. Okay. Now, when you copy this, though, now here's the hard part. Okay. Now this is where it's a little bit of the nuanced work that you got to do. When you copy and paste this into Word, okay, this is what you get is the top. Okay. You just highlight, copy and paste into Word. This is what you get. Okay. Now, obviously, this is not what you want, right? Because it's all kind of got some sort of gray background. It can look kind of wonky, right? You might get this, which is close. Or if you go with the unformatted text, you'll notice that it also takes out the italics. Okay, again, the journal is italicized in the format. Okay, it gets rid of the italics. So if you take the italics out of the format, that's part of the format. So in many professors are super strict about if they give you a format to follow, you must follow that format. So if you're not following the format, then you're going to get points off, guaranteed. Okay, there may be even professors who go in there with a ruler. I mean, from back in the day when I was writing, they come in with a ruler and check your margins. You follow in the 1-inch margins, right? I mean, obviously that's easier to do now when we can just do it in a Word document and look that your margins are 1 inch. But nonetheless, that's how people try to cheat before, because when we do I need to write a 5-page paper, and it's like you crimp that margin in like a little bit of a 1/4 inch. It kind of looks like it's right about right, but it kind of moves your text down a little bit. You guys know what I mean. So nonetheless, when people are looking at formats, they are looking for specifically that you follow the format. Now, this also doesn't follow the format, because the format you can see right here, okay, the first line is a normal, but then you have an indent for all the lines that come afterwards. This is the format that needs to be there. Okay, so as these got rid of the indent, you have to go back and then fix it. Okay, so there's some small adjustments that need to be done. We have to work on our soft skills. Again, if you were in a university class, developing soft skills go hand in hand with your coursework. You cannot just roll into a chemistry class and just do the chemistry stuff and not work on the rest of it. Okay, we have to work on things like formatting. We have to learn how to use Excel and do graphs and charts, and making sure that your font is the same. Again, these are skills that you have to do regardless of what kind of class you're in. Okay, now it's more important, obviously, if you're in an English class and your citation is in Arial and the rest of your text is in Times New Roman and it looks bad. Okay, and that same thing goes for when we're in the job place, when you're in the marketplace and you're trying to produce some sort of document for your boss, and you've got bullet points that are 18 different fonts and different colors and adjustments and titles that are different font sizes and things. It looks bad, right? And so these are small things that can be done that improve the quality of your work, that are just attention to detail. And I say that, and it's hard for me to do those things. I am horrible at detail. Okay, I don't pay attention to details hardly ever, and so it is a difficult thing to pay attention to. Okay, but whatever fonts and styles and things are important for if we're following a specific format. Okay. So this is the academic search complete database, right? So here there's all kinds of databases. Again, these are the databases that it reaches into. So there's a variety of these databases that it accesses. And so when you come over here and you type in climate change, right, it should give us something like 1 million sources, right? So there's a million sources, okay? Now, familiarizing ourselves with this kind of stuff can be important here. So over here are your categories. Now, obviously, if we're looking for academic journals, newspaper articles, magazines, news, and books, like those are pretty much the categories, right, that I am looking for, okay? And so if we pick those as areas, we can just focus on those areas that you need for your bibliography, okay? Now we've narrowed it down a little bit, 864,000, okay? But so some of these searches might be where you need to focus on a particular one at a time, like focus on news articles first and then focus on books and then look at the magazines. So if we just narrow this down to academic journals, like the books, take the news articles out. Not quite sure what the difference is of the two news areas. Okay, we've narrowed it down to about 500,000. Okay, we've gotten everything out just by going to academic journals, right? Another great way to click in here are scholarly, peer-reviewed journals. If you're doing any kind of science research, doesn't matter what topic is, these are going to be of better quality than not. Okay, so when you click on this, it will inevitably cut down our total here. Okay, should have. All right, it didn't cut down too much. All right, so if we want to have access to the articles, obviously linking to the full text, having the full text linked is important. It's not always critical because a lot of times, a lot of universities will have consortium agreements to where if it's not available from your university, it'll be available somewhere else, and then they can borrow from it. This is also one of those times when if the article you want is not available, to use that ask a librarian, and they can probably get you whatever article it is you want. Okay, but in this case, if I just click the full text available, we're just looking for our quick update. All right, there, it dropped it down quite a bit, cut it in half there. Okay, so again, 200,000 sources is still too much. You can't search through 200,000 sources. Okay, so this is where we probably want to narrow down our search terms. Okay, so you have different options here for where you want to narrow your search. So it's climate change and something else. You could narrow climate change to simply in the subject or in the title, right? So if you narrow climate change to the title, that's going to give you a different kind of search criteria because it's not simply just looking anywhere in the article. Okay, and so we should see a rather significant drop here of our thing, maybe. Just thinking about it. All right, so 46,000. Okay, so still not too much. Okay, so but here's where you may want to kind of start looking at various, what are the other subject terms that you want to narrow down to. Okay, so if we're looking at, maybe climate change and land management, right? So if we want to look at things like if we're doing solar energy and things like that, land management is one of those things, along with things like not cutting down trees and planting more trees and a variety of other areas that are associated with it. So we got 680. It's not bad. That's probably a fairly reasonable list of stuff. All right, and so from here, if you are looking through here, you can often find other, as I said, when you click in on the source, it will generate other other kind of search criteria, whether we're looking at, here they're talking about switchgrass or, bioenergy or land coverage or negative emission technologies. And so maybe these are other associated or tangential search terms that you want to look at, right? And so these are the kinds of things that I would probably go down to. 680 is probably a reasonable amount. You're probably not going to get more than 50. So, I mean, I would say probably 100 is probably where you want to be if you've narrowed your search criteria enough. So, I mean, you can over search where you put too much in there and then you get like 5, and that's not really great. And so you want to I think the sweet spot is roughly about 100. So if you can get your search down to about 100, that's usually probably a good basis, because again, you're not going to look through more than 100 titles, because most of these you're reading the titles is essentially what you're probably looking for, is reading the titles and see if anything jumps out at you, right? And then from there you'll pull and then dig deeper as you find certain things that are going to fit, because some of these may not particularly be of interest, or they might be totally off topic, right? So as you search through here, you're going to find some that are a little more probably not central to your research paper, right? So that's what I've got for advice for our research, for a research paper, for just developing a topic, for doing some initial preliminary research, for gathering sources. And then as you get into the actual, you're ready to sit down and start some writing, we'll come back and look at the actual process of how do I gather information, how do I get the information out, and then how do I maybe start writing. Okay, so we'll catch you next time with another video on doing research later.